Banished by the galaxy's vote, humanity took action instantly. The massive meeting hall on Nexus Prime buzzed with voices from hundreds of different species. Ambassador Marcus Reed sat quietly in the human section, watching alien delegates discuss humanity's future. His hand stayed calm on the metal table, but his mind raced with worry. The Galactic Council had called this special meeting to vote on one simple question: should humans be allowed to stay in galactic society, or should they be banished forever? For 3 months, different alien species had presented their cases against humanity. The tall, gray-skinned Valari stood first. Their leader, Commander Thane, pointed at holographic images showing human military ships. "Look at their weapons," he said through the translation device. "Humans build tools of war faster than tools of peace. They expand their territory every year. They cannot be trusted." Next came the insect-like hive queens of the Christine Collective. Their spokesperson buzzed angrily. "Humans think as individuals, not as one mind. This makes them unpredictable and dangerous. They refuse to follow proper collective decision-making." Even the plant-like Botanari, who had traded peacefully with humans for decades, spoke against them. Elder Moss rustled his leaves sadly. "Human industries poison air and water. They take resources without asking the planet's permission. They do not respect the natural order." Species after species stood to voice their complaints. The rock people called granite folk said humans moved too fast and changed too much. The energy beings known as the Bright Ones claimed human emotions were too wild and uncontrolled. The underwater Aquarians said humans were too aggressive in their exploration of new worlds. Marcus listened to each accusation without speaking. He had expected this day would come. Humans were different from most galactic species. Where others moved slowly and carefully, humans acted quickly. Where others sought harmony and agreement, humans often disagreed and argued among themselves. Where others feared change, humans embraced it. The voting began in alphabetical order by species name. Each delegation had one vote, regardless of their population size. The Aquarians voted first, guilty of being too dangerous. The Botanari voted next and guilty. The Christine Collective, guilty. Marcus watched the holographic scoreboard as vote after vote appeared. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Out of 882 total votes, only a few species voted to let humans stay. The peaceful scholars from the library worlds voted not guilty. The traitor species called the Wanderers also supported humans. A few others followed, but they were vastly outnumbered. When the final count appeared on the massive display screen, the result was crushing. 847 species voted to banish humanity from galactic society. Only 12 voted against banishment. 23 chose not to vote at all. The ancient judge, a being so old that no one remembered what species he belonged to, struck his ceremonial hammer 3 times. The Galactic Council has decided. Humanity is found guilty of being incompatible with galactic civilization. You have 7 standard days to remove all human presence from Council space. This decision cannot be appealed. The hall erupted in conversations as different species discussed the verdict. Some seemed relieved. Others appeared worried about what would happen next. A few looked sad to see humans go. Marcus stood slowly and activated his speaking device. The enormous hall gradually grew quiet as thousands of alien eyes, sensors, and other detection organs focused on him. He looked small compared to the massive alien delegates around him. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Marcus began, his voice carried by speakers throughout the hall. "We have heard your decision. We understand your concerns about our species. We will respect your vote and comply with your verdict." He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that belonged to species from across the galaxy. "We came to you in friendship 50 years ago. We offered our knowledge, our trade, our protection against common threats. We believed that different species could work together despite their differences." The ambassador's voice remained calm, but something in his tone made several alien delegates shift uncomfortably. "It seems we were wrong about that possibility. You have chosen to remove us from your civilization because we are too different, too dangerous, too unpredictable for your comfort." Marcus straightened his shoulders and spoke his final words to the Galactic Council. "We will withdraw from your space as requested. But remember this day, honored delegates. Remember the choice you made here. Remember that you decided peace and cooperation were less important than fear and comfort." The human delegation filed out of the chamber in perfect formation. They moved with military precision, their faces showing no emotion. But hidden cameras throughout the hall recorded something that would puzzle alien analysts for years afterward. Despite facing complete exile from galactic society, not a single human appeared angry or defeated. Instead, they looked almost relieved. As soon as the humans left the building, encrypted messages began transmitting across human space at faster than light speeds. The messages used quantum encryption that even the most advanced council computers could not break. Each message contained coordinates and a single word that every human military commander, colony governor, and ship captain had been waiting to hear for decades. The word was Exodus. Within hours, human colonies across the galaxy received new orders. Research stations powered down their equipment and prepared to leave. Military bases began moving their weapons and supplies. Trade posts started closing their doors to alien customers. Admiral Victoria Hayes stood on the bridge of her flagship, reading the message she had hoped never to receive. But now that it had come, she felt ready. For 30 years, humans had prepared for this possibility. They had built hidden bases, developed secret technologies, and created backup plans that the Galactic Council never suspected existed. All ships, this is Admiral Hayes, she broadcast to the human fleet. Operation Exodus is now active. Begin withdrawal procedures according to Plan 7. All human assets are to be removed from Council space within 6 days. Nothing is to be left behind. Captain Elena Rodriguez received her orders while docking at a trading station in neutral space. Her cargo ship was immediately filled with critical supplies and computer data cores containing the accumulated knowledge of human civilization. She would be one of thousands of captains carrying humanity's most important resources to places the galaxy had never seen. On research stations throughout human space, scientists worked frantically to pack up experiments and equipment. Dr. James Morton supervised the dismantling of humanity's largest agricultural facility on Kepler 442b. Massive cargo ships descended like mechanical storms, loading not just equipment and supplies but the very soil itself. The genetically modified crops that had fed 3 sectors disappeared into cargo holds. The alien monitoring stations tracked every human ship that departed, but their sensors could not understand what they were seeing. The human vessels seemed to be using jump drive technology that was more advanced than anything the Council possessed. Ships disappeared into strange energy fields that led to unknown destinations. As the deadline approached, the last human presence in galactic space began to vanish. Diplomatic missions sealed their doors and went dark. Massive shipyards powered down their fusion reactors and drifted silently into deep space. Trade stations that had operated for decades suddenly stopped responding to communications. By the 7th day, every human ship, station, and settlement had disappeared from known space completely. Long-range sensors detected nothing where human colonies had once thrived. It was as if 40 billion humans had simply ceased to exist. The Galactic Council convened an emergency meeting to discuss what had happened. No species in galactic history had ever evacuated so quickly and completely.
Where had humanity gone?
How had they moved so efficiently? And why did their most advanced sensors find absolutely nothing in the regions where humans had lived? High Counselor Thane addressed the worried assembly. Perhaps we underestimated these humans. No species has ever vanished so completely. It is as if they planned for this day. But in the dark spaces between stars in dimensions that Council science could not detect, humanity was very much alive. They were building something magnificent and terrible, something that would change the galaxy forever. The Council had voted to banish humanity. Now they would discover what humanity could accomplish when they were truly free to act without restrictions. The real story was just beginning. Banished by the galaxy's vote, humanity took action. Instantly, Admiral Victoria Hayes watched the final evacuation reports scroll across her command screen. The speed of humanity's withdrawal had shocked even the most experienced galactic observers. What should have taken years was happening in mere days. Every human settlement, research station, and military base was being stripped clean and abandoned. Her flagship, the massive dreadnought Defiant, hung in space above the former human colony of New Terra. Below them, the last cargo ships were loading the final pieces of equipment and supplies. Even the orbital platforms around the planet were being dismantled and packed away. "Admiral," reported Captain Blake from his position at the communications console, "New Terra evacuation is complete. All civilians and military personnel have been relocated. The planet is now empty of human presence. Victoria nodded grimly. Very good. Signal the fleet to move to the next coordinates. We have 4 more colonies to evacuate before the deadline. On the planet's surface, Director James Morton supervised the final shutdown procedures for New Terra's main city. The settlement that had been home to 12 million humans now stood completely empty. Automated systems continued to maintain basic life support and lighting, but no human voices echoed through the silent streets. The evacuation had been unlike anything seen before in galactic history. Humans had not simply packed up and left like normal refugees. They had taken everything. Buildings had been disassembled piece by piece. The very soil from agricultural areas had been loaded onto massive cargo haulers. Even the manufactured atmosphere that allowed humans to breathe on the planet had been extracted and stored in specialized containers. "Sir," called Lieutenant Torres from the loading dock, "the bio-storage units are full. We have successfully collected all the modified plant and animal species from the agricultural zones. Nothing remains that wasn't here before human colonization." James looked across the barren landscape that had once been fertile farmland. The Galactic Council's observers would find nothing but the original rocky surface that had existed before humans arrived. It was as if the colony had never existed at all. Meanwhile, Captain Elena Rodriguez piloted her heavy transport through the Titan Nebula, following coordinates that led to regions no galactic map had ever recorded. Her cargo hold contained industrial fabricators, quantum computers, and several sealed containers marked only with the code name, Looking Glass. The containers required 3 different authorization codes just to transport them safely. Navigation, what's our status? Elena asked her pilot. We're approaching the coordinates now, Captain, but sensors are showing some very strange readings ahead. There are structures out there that don't match anything in our databases. Elena moved to the forward viewport and stared into the swirling colors of the nebula. Slowly, shapes began to emerge from the cosmic dust, massive geometric structures that seemed to bend space around themselves. Platform after platform arranged in complex patterns that hurt to look at directly. By all the stars, whispered her pilot. Captain, those structures are huge. Some of them are larger than space stations. How long have they been out here? Longer than you might think, Elena replied quietly. Signal the control platform that Transport 77 Alpha is approaching with the Looking Glass cargo. Request docking instructions. The response came immediately as if they had been expected. A docking tube extended from the nearest structure, and Elena guided her ship into position. As they connected, she could feel a subtle vibration through the ship's hull. Whatever these structures were, they were very much alive with activity. Back in Council space, alien monitoring stations were recording everything they could about humanity's withdrawal. The Volari had positioned their most advanced sensor arrays to track human movements. But the results were confusing and disturbing. Commander Thane studied the latest reports in his command center on the Volari homeworld. These readings make no sense, he told his technical staff. The human ships appear to be using jump technology that should be impossible. They're disappearing into what looks like folded space. His chief scientist, Dr. Kalin, pointed at the holographic display showing human ship movements. Sir, we've tracked over 10,000 human vessels leaving Council space, but our long-range sensors show no sign of them in any known system. It's as if they're jumping to places that don't exist on any star chart. That's impossible, Thane replied. Space is space. There are no hidden regions large enough to accommodate the entire human population. Unless, Dr. Kalin said slowly, they've discovered something about space that we don't understand. Similar discussions were taking place across the galaxy. The Christine Collective had deployed their most sensitive detection equipment, but their hive mind could make no sense of the quantum signatures left by departing human ships. The signals seemed to lead into dimensions that their mathematics said were impossible. On the water world of Aquatica, the Aquarian Council met in their deepest ocean trenches to discuss the human evacuation. Elder Wave speaker Blue Current expressed the growing concern felt by many species. The humans are not behaving like a defeated species, she communicated through bioelectrical pulses. Defeated species flee in panic, leaving chaos behind. These humans move with purpose and planning. They take everything of value and leave nothing useful for others. Perhaps we have made an error, suggested young Current Green Tide. Perhaps banishing them was not the wise choice we believed it to be. The decision is made, Blue Current replied firmly. But we should monitor what happens next very carefully. As the 7th day approached, the last human installations began to go dark. The massive shipyards at Proxima Centauri, which had built some of the most advanced vessels in the galaxy, powered down their fusion cores and drifted silently into deep space. The research stations that had developed new medical treatments and technological innovations sealed their laboratories and transmitted their final status reports. Dr. Sarah Kim stood in the control room of humanity's largest research facility, watching as the final data transfers completed. 50 years of scientific research was being compressed and transmitted to coordinates she had memorized but never visited. All data transfers complete, Doctor, reported her assistant. The quantum storage arrays are empty. All research materials have been relocated. Sarah took one last look around the laboratory where she had spent 20 years of her life. The facility had developed technologies that had revolutionized medicine for dozens of species. Diseases that had plagued the galaxy for centuries had been cured here. Now all of that knowledge was leaving with humanity. Initiate final shutdown, she ordered. Set all systems to standby mode and seal the facility. By the deadline, every trace of human presence in Council space had vanished. The galaxy's most advanced sensor networks found nothing where human colonies had once thrived. Shipping lanes that had bustled with human cargo vessels now carried only silence. Research stations that had shared knowledge with alien scientists no longer responded to communications. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address what they were already calling the Great Vanishing. High Counselor Thane stood before the assembled delegates, his voice carrying unprecedented uncertainty. Fellow council members, he began, we have witnessed something that defies our understanding. Humanity has not simply left our territory, they have disappeared entirely. Our most advanced tracking systems show no trace of human ships, settlements, or even individual humans anywhere in known space. The insect-like delegate from the Christine Collective buzzed anxiously. This should not be possible. 40 billion beings cannot simply vanish without leaving any trace. Elder Moss of the Botanari rustled his leaves nervously. Perhaps we have underestimated what humans are capable of. No species in galactic history has ever moved so quickly or so completely. The question now, Thane continued, is whether this disappearance was planned long before our vote, or whether humanity possesses capabilities we never suspected. Unknown to the Council, their questions were already being answered in the hidden dimensions where humanity had fled. In spaces that existed between the normal fabric of reality, human colonies were not just surviving, they were thriving. Technologies that had been kept secret for decades were finally being deployed openly. Research that had been limited by Council regulations was proceeding without restrictions. Admiral Hayes stood on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, a massive structure that had been built in complete secrecy over the past 30 years. Through the transparent walls, she could see dozens of other installations, each one larger and more advanced than anything the Galactic Council had ever constructed. Status report, she requested from her Chief of Staff. All evacuated personnel have been successfully relocated. Admiral, colonial populations are settling into their new homes ahead of schedule. Industrial production is already exceeding pre-evacuation levels. Victoria smiled grimly. Excellent. Begin Phase 2 of the Exodus Protocol. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity can accomplish when we're no longer bound by their rules. The Council had voted to banish humanity because they feared what humans might become. Now they were about to discover that their fears had been far too small. Banished by the galaxy's vote, humanity took action instantly. 3 years had passed since humanity vanished from galactic society, and the consequences were becoming impossible to ignore. The Galactic Council had expected life to continue normally after removing what they saw as a dangerous and disruptive species. Instead, they discovered that humans had been far more important to galactic civilization than anyone had realized. Dr. Alara of the Christine Collective stood before an emergency session of the Council, her crystalline body reflecting the chamber's lights in worried patterns. The holographic displays around her showed economic data, trade statistics, and predictive models that painted a grim picture of the galaxy's future. Honored delegates, she began. Her voice translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. Our analysis of the post-human galaxy reveals a critical situation. Economic collapse is accelerating across all sectors. Trade routes that depended on human logistics networks have shut down completely. Medical technologies that humans developed cannot be replicated by our current science. The massive chamber buzzed with concerned conversations as species representatives discussed the implications. The Aquarian delegate raised a tentacle to speak. Surely this is temporary. Our civilizations existed long before humans joined the galactic community. Dr. Alara's crystals dimmed to a darker blue, indicating disagreement. That is incorrect, honored colleague. While our species existed before humans, our current interconnected civilization developed over the 50 years since first contact with humanity. They were not just participants. They were essential infrastructure. Commander Voss of the militant Draknari species slammed his armored fist on his speaking platform. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. Impossible. We Draknari are the greatest warriors in the galaxy. We built our strength without human help, and we can face any challenge without them. But even as he spoke, urgent messages were being delivered to his command staff. 3 full Draknari battle fleets had engaged the ancient enemy known as the Devourers at the galaxy's edge. All 3 fleets had been completely destroyed. The mechanical entities that had slept for centuries were moving again, and they seemed stronger than ever before. Commander Voss, Dr. Alara replied calmly, "When did your fleets last achieve victory against the Devourers without human support?" The Draknari commander's silence was answer enough. For 30 years, human fleets had fought alongside Draknari forces to keep the mechanical swarms contained. The humans had developed tactics and weapons specifically designed to counter the Devourers' ability to adapt and evolve. Without human expertise, even the galaxy's finest warriors were being overwhelmed. On the agricultural world of Haven, Dr. Kess watched helplessly as the crops that fed her people began to fail. The fields that had produced abundant harvests for decades were now yielding smaller and smaller amounts of food. The plants were reverting to their original wild forms, losing the genetic modifications that had made them so productive. "The problem is clear," she explained to the Planetary Council through her translator. "These crop variants were developed through human genetic engineering techniques that we do not fully understand. Without human scientists to maintain the modifications, the plants are returning to their natural state." Similar problems were appearing across the galaxy. The Botanari found that their carefully maintained forest worlds were showing signs of disease that human-developed treatments had previously prevented. The rock-like granite folk discovered that mining equipment designed with human technology was breaking down without proper maintenance protocols. Most disturbing of all were the reports from deep space exploration missions. Survey teams were finding strange debris fields where human colonies had once existed, but the debris was not from destruction. It was clearly the remains of massive construction projects. Something had been built in those locations, then moved elsewhere. Captain Rex of the exploration vessel, Wanderer, transmitted his final report from the edge of the former human system of Wolf 359. "We have discovered structures here that defy our understanding. They appear to be hidden in folded space-time, visible only when our sensors operate at specific frequencies. The construction methods are beyond anything we have seen before." His voice carried growing excitement and fear. "The energy readings are unprecedented. Whatever was built here required power sources that should not exist. But that's not the most disturbing part. These structures are not ruins. They show signs of recent activity. Someone or something is still building out here." The transmission suddenly filled with static and interference. "Wait, something's happening. We're detecting movement in the hidden structures. Multiple large objects approaching our position. By the void, the power readings are going off our instruments completely. Something's coming. Something by..." The message ended abruptly. The Wanderer was never seen or heard from again. The disappearance of exploration ships near former human territories was becoming a pattern that the Council could no longer ignore. 7 vessels had vanished while investigating areas where humans had once lived. In each case, the final transmissions mentioned hidden structures and impossible energy readings. High Counselor Thane called for another emergency session, but his usual confidence had been replaced by visible worry. "Fellow delegates, we face a situation that our ancestors never prepared us for. The removal of humanity from our civilization has not brought the peace and stability we expected. Instead, we have discovered that they were far more integrated into our society than we understood. The ancient judge, who had pronounced humanity's banishment, 3 years earlier spoke for the first time since the original trial. His voice was so old and mechanical that many delegates needed multiple translation cycles to understand him. In my long existence, I have seen many species rise and fall. I have witnessed civilizations that seemed mighty crumble into dust overnight. But I have never seen a species whose absence could damage an entire galaxy. Perhaps our judgment was flawed. Elder Moss of the Botanari rustled his leaves in the pattern that indicated deep concern. The question we must ask ourselves is not whether we made a mistake. The question is whether we can survive the consequences of our decision. Reports continued to flood in from across the galaxy. The Nexus Trade Exchange recorded its worst economic performance in recorded history. Human corporations had facilitated nearly half of all interspecies commerce through their advanced translation protocols, standardized currency systems, and logistics networks. Without these systems, trade between species was becoming increasingly difficult and expensive. Medical facilities throughout the galaxy reported growing shortages of treatments that had been developed by human researchers. Diseases that had been eradicated for decades were returning because the vaccines and medicines used human biotechnology that other species could not reproduce. Even more troubling were the reports of technological failures. Many species had become dependent on human-designed systems without realizing it. Computer networks used human programming languages. Transportation systems relied on human navigation protocols. Communication arrays operated using human-developed frequency modulation techniques. As these systems began to fail without proper maintenance, the true scope of humanity's integration into galactic civilization became clear. They had not been conquerors or invaders. They had been the glue that held the galaxy's diverse civilizations together. Dr. Alara presented her final analysis to the Council with crystals that had dimmed to their darkest shade. Our predictive models now show a 78% probability of total civilizational collapse within 50 years. The cascade failures we are experiencing will only accelerate as more human-designed systems break down. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before continuing. But there is something else. Something that may be even more significant than our internal problems. The chamber fell, silent as every delegate focused their attention on her. Our long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures coming from unknown regions of space. The power levels involved are beyond anything we have ever recorded. Whatever humanity has been building during their exile, it represents a level of technological advancement that makes our greatest achievements look primitive. Commander Voss spoke quietly, his usual bluster replaced by grim realization. You believe they are preparing to return? I believe, Dr. Alara replied, that they never really left. I think they have been watching us, waiting to see if we would learn from our mistake. And I fear that our time to make amends is running out. The galaxy that had voted to banish humanity was slowly dying without them. But in the dark spaces between stars, humanity was becoming something far more powerful than the species the Council had feared. The real question was no longer whether humans would return. The question was what they would have become when they did. Unbanished by the galaxy's vote, humanity took action instantly. The first sign of humanity's return was not an invasion fleet or a declaration of war. It was a simple message that appeared simultaneously on every communication system in Council space. The broadcast reached every world, every space station, every ship in the galaxy at exactly the same moment. Despite the vast distances involved, the quantum encryption required to accomplish such a feat was beyond anything the Council possessed. Their most advanced computer systems should have been able to process the signal, but instead they detected layer after layer of security, protocols that seemed designed by minds operating on entirely different principles than galactic science understood. Citizens of the galaxy, the familiar voice of Ambassador Marcus Reed began, speaking in perfect harmony through trillions of devices across hundreds of worlds. 5 years ago, your representatives chose to exile humanity from galactic civilization. We respected that decision. We withdrew completely from your space as requested, taking nothing that belonged to others. In the Great Council chambers on Nexus Prime, emergency sessions were already beginning as delegates tried to understand how such a broadcast was possible. High Counselor Thane stared at the holographic projection that had appeared unbidden in the center of the chamber. showing Reed's calm face as clearly as if he were standing there in person. During our absence, Reed continued, we have been watching. We have observed the devourer swarms break through your defensive lines. We have witnessed the collapse of trade networks and the failure of medical systems. We have seen 3 member species go extinct from diseases that could have been easily prevented. The broadcast paused, and for a moment the only sound in the vast chamber was the nervous clicking, buzzing and rustling of hundreds of alien species. Then Reed's image leaned forward slightly, his expression becoming more serious. Your galaxy is dying, honored delegates. Within 30 years, most of your civilizations will have collapsed completely. Your greatest scientists know this. Your military commanders understand it. Your leaders fear it. You lack the knowledge, the technology, and the unity necessary to prevent this catastrophe. Commander Voss of the Dreknari stood abruptly, his massive armored form towering over other delegates. How dare you threaten us? We are not afraid of human tricks. But Reed's image did not react to the interruption. The message had been recorded, not transmitted live. This was not a conversation, it was a declaration. We have spent these 5 years preparing. Reed continued. We return to you not as the species you banished, but as something new. Something evolved. Something stronger. We offer our assistance one final time, but this offer comes with conditions that are not negotiable. The transmission included coordinates that led to the dead system of Sol, humanity's ancient birthplace that had been stripped bare during their exodus. Several Council scout ships were already being dispatched to investigate, though their crews had little hope of finding anything useful in the lifeless system. Captain Diana Foster stood in the command center of New Geneva Station, watching holographic displays that showed real-time data from every corner of the galaxy. Around her, dozens of other human officers monitored everything from devourer fleet movements to plague outbreaks to resource wars in the Outer Rim territories. Commander Park, she called to her communications officer. What's the response from the Council scouts? Lieutenant Commander Park looked up from his console with a slight smile. They've arrived at the Sol system, Captain. Their sensor readings are quite interesting. Foster moved to the main display, which showed the view from the arriving Council ships. Where Earth had once orbited was now a structure that challenged every assumption about what was possible in engineering and physics. A ring world larger than any planet spun slowly in Earth's former orbital position. Its inner surface glowed with the lights of countless cities, visible even from deep space. The ring itself appeared to be constructed from materials that reflected and absorbed light in ways that should not have been possible. Massive defensive platforms floated in perfect formation around the ring world, their hulls inscribed with geometric patterns that seemed to bend space around themselves. Each platform was larger than most species' greatest battleships, and there were hundreds of them arranged in complex three-dimensional formations. But most impressive of all were the ships. Fleets that numbered in the tens of thousands surrounded the system, their designs unlike anything in galactic databases. They seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that Council sensors could not properly detect. The lead Council scout ship, commanded by Captain Zara of the Valari fleet, transmitted her report with barely controlled amazement. High Counselor, what we are seeing here defies explanation. The humans have constructed a ring world with an internal surface area equivalent to millions of planets. The population that could be supported by such a structure would number in the hundreds of billions. High Counselor Thane's voice crackled through the communication system. Captain, are you certain these readings are accurate? What you describe should be impossible to build, much less power and maintain. Sir, I am transmitting full sensor data now. But there is something else. We are being scanned by technologies that our instruments cannot identify. The power levels involved are beyond our ability to measure. Whatever humanity has become, they now possess capabilities that make our most advanced science look primitive. As if summoned by the mention of scans, space around the ring world suddenly filled with activity. Hundreds of human vessels appeared from what seemed like empty space, surrounding the small Council fleet in moments. They had not jumped in or flown from hiding places. They had simply materialized as if they had always been there. Foster's image appeared on the main screen of the Council scout ship. She wore a uniform that incorporated design elements no terrestrial culture had ever produced, suggesting that humanity had indeed changed in fundamental ways during their exile. Captain Zara, Foster said calmly, you and your ships are welcome in our space. We invite your delegates to come aboard New Geneva Station for discussions. However, You should be aware that this invitation extends only to official representatives of the Galactic Council. Any attempt at espionage or data gathering will result in your immediate removal from this system. Back in the Council chambers, the full implications of humanity's transformation were beginning to sink in. The species they had banished, for being too dangerous, had used their exile to become something far more powerful than anyone had imagined. Possible. Dr. Alara of the Christine Collective was the first to speak after viewing the sensor data from Sol. The construction we are seeing represents a level of technological advancement that should have taken centuries to achieve. How did they accomplish so much in only 5 years? Elder Moss of the Botanari rustled his leaves in patterns that indicated deep unease. Perhaps they did not accomplish this in 5 years. Perhaps they were preparing for our decision long before we made it. The ancient judge who had presided over humanity's banishment spoke with a voice heavy with implication. Or perhaps being free from our restrictions allowed them to advance at their natural pace for the first time since joining Galactic Society. High Counselor Thane called for order as the chamber erupted in worried conversations. Fellow delegates, we must decide how to respond to humanity's offer. They claim to have solutions to our current crises, but at what cost? The answer came sooner than expected. Foster's image appeared in the council chamber without invitation or announcement, proving that humanity could now bypass even the most secure communication systems with ease. Honored delegates, Foster began, we do not wish to negotiate with committees or debate our terms with politicians. Our offer is simple and final. The galaxy faces extinction within 30 years unless immediate action is taken. We have the knowledge and power to prevent this catastrophe. She paused, allowing her words to echo through the vast chamber. In exchange, we require only what you denied us before, recognition as equals and a voice in our own fate. We will not again submit to judgment by species who do not understand us. We will not again allow our growth to be limited by others' fears. Commander Voss stepped forward, his massive form bristling with weapons and armor. And if we refuse your generous offer? Foster's expression remained unchanged. Then you will face the consequences of your own choices. We will return to our space and watch as your civilizations burn. The galaxy will belong to the Devourers, and what remains will serve as a lesson to any other species that might someday face a similar decision. The chamber fell silent except for the mechanical hum of translation systems working over time to process the implications of humanity's ultimatum. The species that had once been judged too dangerous to coexist with galactic civilization had returned with the power to determine whether that civilization would continue to exist at all. The council that had voted to banish humanity now faced a simple choice: accept human leadership or watch their galaxy die. Time was running out, and everyone in the chamber knew it. Tucker banished by the galaxy's vote. Humanity took action instantly. The Devourer fleet that had consumed 3 entire solar systems in the past year met humanity's response force at the edge of the Helix Nebula. Council observers, granted special permission to witness the engagement, watched from safe distances as 2 forces that represented completely different approaches to existence prepared to clash. The Devourers had been the galaxy's nightmare for centuries. Mechanical entities that consumed entire worlds to build more of themselves, they adapted to every weapon and learned from every defeat. Previous battles against them had required massive fleets and resulted in terrible casualties, with victory never guaranteed. Humanity's fleet was smaller than anyone expected, only 300 ships compared to the thousands of Devourer constructs. But as the battle began, it became clear that numbers were no longer relevant. The human vessels didn't just fight the Devourers, they rewrote the fundamental rules of combat. Admiral Foster watched from the bridge of her flagship, ascendant as space itself seemed to bend around the human fleet. Energy weapons that should have taken minutes to charge fired continuously. When Devourer units adapted to one form of attack, the human weapons evolved new methods faster than the mechanical minds could process. Status report, Foster requested from her tactical officer. Commander Park looked up from his console with an expression of controlled amazement. Admiral, the enemy adaptation rate has dropped to 0. They cannot adjust to our weapons because our weapons are changing faster than their processing systems can analyze. The battle that everyone expected to last for days ended in less than 3 hours. The devourer constructs, faced with opponents who could out-evolve their own evolution, began to exhibit behavior that no one had ever seen before. Instead of fighting to the last unit, they started to retreat. Then, impossibly, they began transmitting surrender signals. "Admiral," Park reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "We are receiving communication attempts from 17 Devourer core nodes. They are requesting negotiations." Foster raised an eyebrow. "Negotiations? With machines that have spent millennia consuming everything in their path? It appears they have concluded that joining us is preferable to being destroyed by us. Sir, the war that had threatened to consume the galaxy ended not with humanity's victory over the Devourers, but with the mechanical entity's complete surrender. Faced with opponents who could adapt faster than their own evolution, the ancient machines chose survival through cooperation rather than destruction through resistance. Within weeks, the former Devourers had integrated themselves into humanity's expanding confederation. They now called themselves the Synthesis, contributing their vast computational power to solving problems that had plagued organic life for millennia. The transformation of galactic civilization accelerated beyond anyone's ability to predict or control. Species that had voted to banish humanity 5 years earlier now competed to be the first to join the human confederation. The Valari, who had led the charge for exile, were among the first to formally request membership. High Counselor Thane stood before what remained of the old Galactic Council, his gray skin showing stress patterns that indicated deep emotional conflict. "Fellow delegates, we must face the reality of our situation. The Human Confederation now controls technology that makes our greatest achievements obsolete. They have solved problems we thought were unsolvable and defeated enemies we thought were unbeatable." The chamber was much smaller than it had been during humanity's trial. Many species had already withdrawn from the Council to join humanity's growing alliance. Those who remained were either too proud to admit their mistake or too afraid of what submission might mean. "The question," Thane continued, "is whether we maintain our independence and face an uncertain future, or whether we seek terms with the humans while such terms might still be available to us." Elder Moss of the Botanari rustled his leaves in the pattern that indicated careful consideration. "What guarantee do we have that the humans will treat us as equals rather than as conquered subjects?" The answer came from Dr. Elena Martinez, humanity's new chief diplomat whose image appeared in the council chamber. She had been Marcus Reed's assistant during the original trial, and her presence served as a reminder of how completely the situation had changed. "Honored delegates," Martinez began, "humanity holds no grudges for past decisions. You made choices based on fear and incomplete understanding, and we recognize that such choices are part of how civilizations grow and learn." Her voice carried none of the anger or resentment that many council members had expected. "We invite all species to join our confederation not as subjects or servants, but as partners in building something greater than what existed before. The galaxy faces challenges that no single species can overcome. Together, we can create a civilization that transcends the limitations that have held us all back." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within days, formal applications for Confederation membership flooded in from across the galaxy. The Christine Collective submitted their request first, followed quickly by the Aquarians, the Granite Folk, and dozens of other species, even the proud Draknari, who had boasted of their military supremacy, requested terms for joining the Human Alliance after witnessing what had happened to the Devourers. Commander Voss himself led the delegation that negotiated their integration into Confederation military forces. The transformation went beyond simple political reorganization. Human technology revolutionized every aspect of galactic life. Medical treatments that had been limited to basic species were replaced by universal healing systems that worked for any form of life. Transportation networks that had taken weeks to traverse were reduced to days or hours through advanced space-folding techniques. Most remarkably, the philosophical changes were even more dramatic than the technological ones. The old Galactic Council had been built on the principle of maintaining stability through exclusion, keeping dangerous or disruptive elements separate from the main civilization. The Human Confederation was founded on exactly the opposite principle, finding ways to integrate different approaches and use diversity as a strength rather than a weakness. Captain Rodriguez, now commanding one of the Confederation's exploration fleets, discovered the practical results of this new approach during a survey mission to the Outer Rim. Her crew included humans, former devourers, Valari, Botanari, and members of 6 other species, all working together on tasks that would have been impossible under the old system. "Captain," reported her science officer, a Christine named Sharp Thought, "the integration of synthesis computational, power with Botanari biological sensors, and human intuitive analysis has produced results that exceed what any of our species could achieve, independently." Rodriguez smiled as she watched her diverse crew work together with an efficiency that the old galaxy had never imagined possible. "That's the point," Sharp thought. "We're not trying to be better humans or better Christine or better anything else. We're trying to be something entirely new." The changes reached every corner of galactic civilization. On New Geneva Station, now serving as one of the Confederation's primary diplomatic centers, beings from hundreds of species worked together on projects that ranged from artistic collaboration to scientific research to industrial development. Dr. Martinez walked through the station's central plaza, observing the peaceful interaction between species that had been suspicious enemies just years before. A group of young Draknari were learning mathematics from elderly botanical scholars. Aquarian engineers were collaborating with human designers on new methods of underwater construction. Former Devourer units were teaching crystalline entities about advanced computation, while learning about organic creativity in return. "Status report," Martinez requested from her aide, a young human named David Chen. "All integration programs are proceeding ahead of schedule," David replied, consulting his datapad. "We have received formal membership requests from over 400 species. Economic productivity across Confederation space has increased by 300% since the integration began. Most importantly, the prediction models now show 0 probability of civilizational collapse." Martinez nodded with satisfaction. "And what about the remaining independent systems?" 17 species are still maintaining independence, but they continue to benefit from our medical and defensive assistance. We expect most of them will eventually choose to join when they see the advantages of full membership." Standing on the observation deck of New Geneva Station, Ambassador Marcus Reed, now bearing the title of First Speaker of the Human Confederation, watched as ships from across the galaxy docked with the massive structure. The vessels represented dozens of different approaches to space travel and engineering, but they all flew the same flag, a simple design that incorporated symbols from every member species. Reed reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. 5 years earlier, the galaxy had voted to banish humanity because they were too dangerous, too unpredictable, too different to coexist peacefully with established civilizations. The galaxy had been right about one thing: humans were dangerous, but not in the way the Council had feared. They were dangerous to stagnation, to fear, to the idea that Diffie,